I watched my two best friends die on their wedding night, and I knew I would be next. But let me take you back to where it all began, to the day we pulled that cursed creature from the Orimili River, the day we feasted like kings, and the day we sealed our fate with every bite of that forbidden flesh. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button, share it with someone who loves African folklore, and subscribe to the channel for more thrilling tales like this one. My name is Chukudi, and I'm a fisherman from Amadiora village, a small settlement hugging the banks of the great Orimili River. For generations, my people have lived off these waters, respecting their moods, honoring their spirits, and never taking more than we needed. The river gave us life, and we gave it reverence. That was the balance. That was the way. Until we broke it. It was the dry season, and the river had retreated to expose vast stretches of cracked earth. Fish were scarce, and hunger had begun to hollow out the cheeks of our children. My friends Obi and Emeka and I would go out every morning before dawn, casting our nets into the murky waters, praying for a catch substantial enough to feed our families. Most days, we returned with nothing but aching backs and the bitter taste of failure. That morning started like any other. The sky was still purple with pre-dawn light when we pushed our canoe into the water. The mist rose from the river like the breath of sleeping gods, and somewhere in the distance, a fish-eagle called out its haunting cry. I remember feeling uneasy, though I couldn't say why. The air felt heavy, charged with something I didn't understand. "This far out?" Emeka asked when I suggested we paddle beyond our usual fishing grounds. "The fish have moved deeper," I said, though I had no real evidence of this. Something was pulling me out there. Some invisible hand guiding our canoe toward the center of the river, where the water ran darkest and deepest. Obi, always the superstitious one, made a sign against evil. The elders say the deep water belongs to Mami Wata and her kind. We should stay in the shallows. "The shallows are empty," I snapped, my frustration getting the better of me. "My children cry themselves to sleep with hunger. I'm not returning home empty-handed again." So we paddled out, farther than we'd ever gone, until the shore became a thin line of green in the distance. The water here was almost black, and perfectly still. No fish jumped. No birds circled. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. That's when we saw it. At first, I thought it was a log floating in the water, but as we drew closer, I realized it was far too large, far too strange. It was a whale, or something like a whale, but wrong somehow. Its skin was pale as moonlight, covered in patterns that seemed to shift and move when you looked at them directly. Its eyes, even in death, held an intelligence that made my stomach clench with primordial fear. "We should leave it," Obi whispered, his voice trembling. But Emeka was already leaning over the side of the canoe, running his hand along the creature's flank. "Do you know how much meat this is? How many people we could feed?" He was right, of course. This creature was massive, easily the length of 3 canoes. Its flesh could feed our entire village for weeks, maybe months if we dried and preserved it properly. We could be heroes. We could end the hunger that had plagued us for so long. "It's already dead," I reasoned, though even as I spoke, doubt gnawed at me. The river gave it to us. Looking back now, I understand how foolish we were. The river gives nothing without taking something in return. We spent the next 4 hours towing the creature back to shore, our muscles screaming with effort, our canoe riding dangerously low in the water. By the time we beached it on the sandy shore near our village, a crowd had already gathered. News travels fast in small communities, and soon it seemed like every man, woman, and child in Amadiora had come to see our catch. They gasped, they pointed, they whispered among themselves. Some looked frightened, but most looked hungry. It had been so long since we'd had meat, So long since we'd tasted anything but cassava and watery soup. Old Nwanze, our village's oldest fisherman, pushed through the crowd. His milky eyes studied the creature for a long moment before he shook his head. "This is not a fish from our river," he said. "Look at its markings. Look at its eyes. This is something else. Something else that will fill our bellies," Emeka said, already sharpening his machete. "Are we supposed to throw it back because it looks strange?" "I'm saying we should consult the oracle," Nwanze insisted. "I'm saying we should ask." "Ask what?" I interrupted, my hunger making me bold. "Ask permission to not starve? The creature is dead. A river brought it to us. We'd be fools to waste it." The crowd murmured their agreement. Hunger is a powerful persuader, and we were all hungry. Even Nwanze seemed to deflate, his warnings dying in his throat as he watched Emeka make the first cut. The flesh beneath that pale skin was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was red as blood, marbled with fat that glowed faintly in the afternoon sun. When we cooked it over open fires that evening, the smell that rose from the flames was intoxicating, rich and complex, like nothing that should come from river water. God help us. We ate. And it was delicious. The meat melted on our tongues, filling our mouths with flavors we didn't have names for. We ate until our bellies ached, until grease ran down our chins, until we laughed at our own gluttony. We shared it with our families, with our neighbors, with anyone who came asking. For the first time in months, Amadiora village went to sleep with full stomachs. I should have known then. I should have recognized the wrongness in how good it tasted, how eagerly we devoured it, how quickly we forgot our traditions and our cautions. But I was drunk on satisfaction, on the praise of my wife, and the joy in my children's eyes. For one night, I was a hero. That night I dreamed of drowning. I was underwater, sinking slowly through layers of darkness, unable to move or cry out. All around me, voices whispered in languages I didn't understand. And then I saw her, a woman rising from the depths below me, her skin as pale as the creature we'd killed, her eyes black as the deep water, her hair floating around her like seaweed. She was beautiful and terrible, and when she smiled, I saw that her teeth were pointed like a shark's. "You ate my daughter," she said, and though we were underwater, I heard her voice as clearly as if she'd whispered directly into my ear. "You killed her and ate her flesh and shared her among you like she was a common fish." I tried to apologize, tried to explain that we didn't know, but no words would come. "Now you are mine," she continued, reaching out with fingers that were too long, too pale. "All of you who tasted her flesh, you belong to the river now. You belong to me." I woke gasping, my chest tight with phantom water. Beside me, my wife Adiezi stirred but didn't wake. I told myself it was just a dream, just my guilty conscience manifesting in my sleep. But my hands were shaking, and I couldn't shake the feeling of those black eyes boring into my soul. The next morning, I went to find Obi and Emeka. I needed to tell them about the dream, needed to hear them laugh at my foolishness. But when I found them at the riverside, preparing their nets for the day's fishing, they both looked as haggard as I felt. "Did you dream?" I asked before they could speak. Their faces told me everything I needed to know. "The woman in the water," Obi whispered. "She said that we ate her daughter," Emeka finished, "that we belong to her now." We stood there in silence, the implications settling over us like a shroud. If we'd all had the same dream, it wasn't a dream at all. It was a message, a warning, or perhaps a promise. "What do we do?" Obi asked, and for the first time since we'd been children, I heard real fear in his voice. I didn't have an answer, not then. I wouldn't have one for 7 more days, when she came for us in the flesh. The river was calm that week, too calm. No fish entered our nets. No birds sang in the mangroves. It was as if all of nature was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to unfold. On the 7th night, after we'd eaten the creature, she came. I was alone in my compound, my wife having taken the children to her mother's village for a naming ceremony. The night was moonless, and the darkness felt alive, pressing against my skin like cold water. I just dozed off in my chair, exhausted from another fruitless day of fishing, when I heard it. A sound like water flowing where no water should be. I opened my eyes to find my compound flooded, not with rain, but with river water that had somehow flowed uphill from the Orimili, that now swirled around my ankles, rising steadily. And standing in the center of it, water streaming from her hair and clothes, was the woman from my dreams. She was even more terrifying in reality. Her skin held a faint luminescence, like moonlight trapped beneath pearl. Her eyes were solid black, no white visible, and they reflected nothing, not the lamplight from my house, not the stars above. She wore what looked like a dress made from riverweed and fish scales, and when she moved, water moved with her, as if she and the river were one and the same. "Chukwudi," she said, and hearing my name in her voice made my blood run cold. "Do you know who I am?" I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up with terror. "I am Urashi, goddess of the Orimili River. I have dwelt in these waters since before your ancestors first pushed their canoes into my current. I have protected your village, provided for your people, asked only for respect in return." Her voice was soft, almost gentle, but beneath it ran a current of rage so deep it made the ground tremble. "And you repaid me by killing and eating my daughter." "We didn't know," I finally managed to croak out. "Please, we didn't know." "You didn't ask," she corrected. "You found a creature unlike any you'd seen before, in waters where strange things dwell, and you didn't ask. You didn't pray or consult your oracle, or show even a moment's hesitation. You saw only meat, and you took it." The water around my ankles was rising faster now, reaching my knees, then my thighs. I tried to move, to run, but my legs wouldn't obey me. "My daughter was curious about your world," Arashi continued, circling me slowly. "She wanted to see the surface, to watch your fires, to understand why humans sang. I warned her that your kind was dangerous, but she didn't believe me. She thought you were harmless, foolish creatures playing at life in boats made of sticks." Her laugh was like breaking waves. She learned the truth too late. "Please," I begged, the water now at my chest. "Punish me, but spare my family, spare my village. They only ate because I brought the creature to shore. This is my sin." "Oh, but they all ate, didn't they?" Arashi moved closer, and I could smell her. Salt and copper and deep dark places, where light never reaches. "Over 100 of your people tasted my daughter's flesh. Over 100 mouths savored her death. You 3 fishermen may have struck the first blow, but your entire village feasted on her corpse." Obi burst into my compound then, drawn by some instinct, or perhaps by his own visitation from the goddess. He stopped short when he saw her, his eyes wide with horror. Moments later, Emika appeared as well, and I realized she'd called us all here, brought us together for judgment. "There you are," Urashi said, turning to regard my friends. "The 3 who discovered her, the 3 who decided her fate. How convenient that you're all here together." The water stopped rising, holding steady at our chests. We stood there, 3 grown men reduced to terrified children by the presence of something ancient and powerful and angry. "I could kill you all right now," Urashi said conversationally. "I could flood your village, drag every man, woman, and child into my depths, fill their lungs with water, until they understand what my daughter felt as she suffocated in your nets. I could make your river run red with blood. I could erase Amadiora from the earth, as if it never existed." "Please," the 3 of us said in unison, our voices breaking with desperation. "But where would be the justice in that?" she continued, as if we hadn't spoken. Quick deaths, painless in their swiftness. No. You need to understand the weight of what you've done. You need to feel it, to carry it, to live with it. She moved her hand through the water, and images appeared in the ripples, visions of what I can only assume was her daughter, a creature of impossible beauty, half woman and half whale, swimming through the river with joy and grace. I saw her watching our village from beneath the surface, her face full of curiosity and wonder. I saw her caught in our net, her confusion turning to panic, her struggle weakening as she suffocated in the air. And I saw us, Obi, Emeka, and me, looking at her dying body and seeing only meat. Tears streamed down my face. The creature we'd killed hadn't been some mindless animal. She'd been someone's daughter, someone's child, a being with thoughts and feelings and dreams of her own. And we'd butchered her without a second thought. Now you begin to understand, Arashi said, and for the first time I heard something other than rage in her voice. I heard grief, deep and bottomless as the river itself. Now you begin to feel what I feel. She waved her hand again, and the water began to recede, flowing back toward the river as impossibly as it had come. But we remained frozen in place, unable to move. Here is my judgment, Arashi announced. The three of you will marry me. Each of you will take me as your wife for 7 years. You will honor me, provide for me, treat me as you would treat the most precious thing in your lives. For 7 years I will live among you, and you will know what it is to love something that dwells between two worlds. We stared at her in disbelief. Of all the punishments I'd imagined, this wasn't one of them. That's all? Emeka asked hesitantly. We just have to marry you? Urashi's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Oh, there are conditions. So many conditions. If any of you fails to meet them, if any of you breaks even one of the rules I set forth, then everyone who tasted my daughter's flesh will die. Not just you three. Every man, woman, and child who swallowed even a single bite. Over 100 souls, gone in an instant. Your entire village, wiped from existence, as if it never was. We weren't just bargaining for our own lives, but for everyone we'd ever known and loved. What are the conditions? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. First, you will build me a house on the riverbank, one that sits half on land and half over water. I will not sleep entirely in your world, nor will I abandon my own. Second, every dawn, you will come to the river and make offerings, not of blood or meat, but of music. You will sing to me, play drums for me, remind me that humans are capable of creating beauty and not just destruction. Third, you will never, never take another wife while bound to me. You will forsake all other women, put aside your current marriages, and devote yourselves entirely to me for these 7 years. Fourth, you will tell no one outside your village what I truly am. If word spreads of a river goddess living among humans, if you bring me unwanted attention from those who would seek to capture or harm me, the agreement ends and everyone dies. Fifth, you must love me. Not pretend to love me, not act as if you love me, but truly, genuinely love me as you would love any wife. I will know if you're merely going through the motions, and that will count as breaking our agreement. Sixth, at the end of 7 years, you must each give me something precious, something so valuable to you that its loss will hurt. What that thing is, you will not know until the time comes. I will decide what I require from each of you. And finally, seventh, if any person in your village, any person at all who ate my daughter's flesh, dies during these 7 years from violence or accident or any unnatural cause, the agreement is broken. You will protect them all, guard them all, keep them all alive until the 7 years are complete. Their lives are in your hands. The enormity of what she was asking settled over us like stones. We would have to abandon our families, our wives, our children. We would have to somehow keep an entire village alive and safe for 7 years. We would have to love a goddess who had every reason to hate us. And if we failed, everyone we'd ever cared about would die. And if we refuse? Obi asked, though we all knew the answer. Then I kill you all, right now, Arashi said simply. Every last person who tasted my daughter. It will be quick at least. Merciful compared to what you deserve. We looked at each other, Obi and Emeka and I. We'd been friends since childhood, fishing together, laughing together, growing up together. And now we would be bound together in this impossible task, married to the same goddess, responsible for the lives of everyone we knew. We accept, I said, before I could think better of it. Before fear could rob me of the courage to speak. We accept, Emeka echoed. We accept, Obi whispered. Arashi nodded, satisfied. Then it begins at sunrise. Build my house, prepare for my arrival, and pray that you're strong enough to keep everyone alive for 7 years, because I promise you, I will not make this easy. She melted back into the water then, leaving us standing in my flooded compound, shaking with the weight of what we'd agreed to. We had until sunrise to tell our wives, to explain to the village what was happening, to somehow make them understand that their lives now depended on us loving a goddess for 7 years. I thought that would be the hardest part. The village elders called an emergency meeting at first light. By then, word had spread about our midnight visitor, about the impossible choice we'd been given, about the curse now hanging over all our heads. Old Nwanzi stood before the gathered crowd with tears streaming down his weathered face. I told you, he kept saying. I told you we should have consulted the oracle. But recriminations wouldn't save us now. What was done, and every person who'd eaten that flesh, which was nearly everyone in Amadiora, now wore the same haunted expression. Parents clutched their children. Wives gripped their husbands' hands. We all understood that our lives had become a thread held in the hands of 3 foolish fishermen and 1 grieving goddess. My wife Adaizi had returned early from her mother's village, somehow sensing that something was wrong. When I told her about Arashi's conditions, about how I would have to leave her and our children to become the goddess's husband for 7 years, she didn't cry. She just looked at me with eyes that held a mixture of fear, anger, and resignation. Do what you must, she said quietly. Keep our children alive. That's all I ask. But I could see the hurt beneath her brave words. We'd been married for 12 years, had built a life together, had created 3 beautiful children together. And now I was abandoning her for a goddess I didn't love, couldn't love, to pay for a sin I'd committed in ignorance. Emeka's wife wasn't as understanding. I could hear her screaming from 3 compounds away, calling him a coward, a fool, every insult she could think of. Their marriage had already been rocky, strained by years of poverty and disappointment. This might be what finally shattered it beyond repair. Obi's wife simply packed her things and left, taking their children with her. When the 7 years are over, if we're all still alive, we'll talk, she said. Nothing more. By noon, we'd gathered the materials to build Urashi's house. The entire village came together to help, working with desperate urgency. If we failed to meet even this first condition, we were all dead. Men cut bamboo and wove it into walls. Women gathered palm fronds for the roof. Children carried water and tools. Even those too old to work sat nearby, offering prayers and encouragement. We built the structure at the river's edge, exactly as Urashi had specified. Half on land, supported by stilts driven deep into the earth, and half extending over the water, supported by posts sunk into the riverbed. It was an architectural impossibility, a house caught between 2 worlds, just like the goddess who would inhabit it. As the sun began to set on that first day, Urashi emerged from the river. In the fading light, she looked almost human, almost normal. She'd chosen a form that was easier for us to comprehend. A beautiful woman, draped in cloth the color of deep water, her hair bound in intricate braids, decorated with river pearls, her feet bare and leaving wet footprints wherever she walked. The villagers parted before her, some averting their eyes in fear, others staring in fascination. Children hid behind their mothers. Dogs whimpered and slunk away. Even the birds seemed to fall silent as she passed. She inspected the house we built, walking through each room, running her fingers along the walls, testing the floor with her weight. Finally she nodded. "It will do." That night, we held the marriage ceremony. There was no joy in it, no celebration. The village priest performed the rites with shaking hands, binding Obi, Emeka, and me to Arashi with words that felt like chains. We each made our vows, promising to honor and cherish her, and with each word, I felt pieces of my old life falling away. Arashi made no vows in return. Why would she? This wasn't a marriage of equals. This was penance. After the ceremony, we stood awkwardly outside her new house, the three of us and our goddess bride, none of us quite sure what happened next. "You'll take turns," Arashi announced. "1 week with each of you, rotating endlessly until the 7 years are complete. You'll provide for me, speak with me, share meals with me. You'll treat me as a beloved wife, not a burden or a punishment." "And at night?" Emeka asked hesitantly. Something flickered in Arashi's black eyes. Amusement, perhaps. "I am a goddess, not a human woman. I don't require your human intimacy." At night, I return to the river to be among my own kind. You'll have the darkness to yourselves. I felt an unexpected wave of relief. At least that indignity would be spared us. The first week fell to me. Every morning I woke before dawn and walked to the river with Obi and Emeka. Together, we sang. Our voices were rough, untrained, but we gave Urashi the music she demanded. We sang fishing songs our fathers had taught us, love songs we'd sung to our wives, lullabies we'd crooned to our children, and sometimes, if we listened carefully, we could hear the river singing back, a deep, complex harmony that made our simple melodies sound more beautiful than they had any right to be. You could eat your food raw. Cooking makes it taste better, I explained, more digestible. But you lose the essence of what it was, she countered. When I consume fish, I take in their speed, their memories of the currents, the paths they swam. You burn all that away. I had no answer for that. How do you explain human customs to a being who lives by entirely different rules? Other times, she spoke of her daughter, how the girl had been born from the joining of river water and starlight, how she'd spent her early years learning the language of fish and the songs of storms, how she'd been gentle and kind, despite her mother's warnings that humans were not to be trusted. She believed in beauty, Arashi said one afternoon, her voice heavy with memory. She thought that any creature capable of creating music and art couldn't be truly cruel. I tried to teach her otherwise, but she wouldn't listen. She was young, only 300 years old. Still a child, really, by our measure. The numbers made my head spin. 300 years was a child to her kind? How old was Arashi herself? How many centuries had she watched over our river while humans lived and died like mayflies? "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. I'm truly, deeply sorry for what we did to her. Urashi turned those black eyes on me. Sorry doesn't bring her back. Sorry doesn't ease the pain of her absence. Sorry is just a word humans use when they want to feel better about their sins. I flinched but didn't argue. She was right. The days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The three of us settled into our strange routine, singing at dawn, spending time with Urashi in rotation, trying to keep the village safe and alive. That last part proved harder than we'd anticipated. People have accidents. They fall, they cut themselves, they get sick. And now, each time someone in Amadiora so much as stubbed a toe, the entire village held its breath, terrified that this would be the death that ended everything. We established watches, guard rotations to keep everyone safe. We banned dangerous activities. No one could climb trees for fruit. No one could go near the cliff paths. No one could hunt in the forest where wild boars might gore them. We made the village children stay close to home, under constant supervision. We turned Amadiora into a prison of safety, and still, we lived in constant fear. 3 months into the first year, a young boy named Defini fell into a cooking fire. His screams brought the entire village running. We pulled him out quickly, but his arm was badly burned. For 3 days he writhed in fever, while the village healer applied poultice after poultice. The whole time, we waited for Arashi's judgment. Did this count as dying from an accident? If he succumbed to infection, would that trigger the curse? I went to Arashi in desperation. Please, I begged. He's just a child. If he dies, is that the end? Will you kill everyone? She regarded me for a long moment before answering. Is his death unnatural? Did someone push him into the fire? No, he just fell while playing. Then it doesn't count. Illness and natural death are part of the human condition. I cannot fault you for that. But if someone strikes him, if someone is careless in a way that leads to his death, then yes, the agreement is broken. Ifeanyi survived, though he bore scars from that day forward. But the incident reminded us all how fragile the thread was that kept us alive. As the first year drew to a close, something unexpected happened. I found myself actually looking forward to my weeks with Arashi. Not because I'd fallen in love with her. I still feared her, still felt the weight of guilt whenever I looked at her. But because she was interesting. She told me stories of the river's history, of the kingdoms that had risen and fallen along its banks, of the first humans she'd met thousands of years ago, who'd worshipped her with reverence, instead of taking her for granted. She showed me how the river truly worked, the complex ecosystems hidden beneath the surface, the way currents carried messages from one end of the Oremili to the other, the secret languages of frogs and water beetles. She opened my eyes to a world I'd fished in my entire life, without ever truly seeing. "You're not as stupid as I thought you'd be," she said one day, and I laughed despite myself. High praise from a goddess. Don't let it go to your head. You're still the man who killed my daughter. The reminder was like cold water, washing away any momentary warmth. She would never let me forget. That was part of the punishment, too. Obi struggled more than Emeka or me. His natural superstition made him constantly afraid around Arashi. He could barely look at her without trembling, could barely speak without stammering. During his weeks with her, he was miserable, counting the hours until he could hand her off to the next husband. Emeka, surprisingly, seemed to find a strange peace in the arrangement. His marriage had been loveless for years, and in some ways, this gave him an escape. He treated Arashi with respect, but also a kind of casual familiarity that sometimes made her smile, an expression both beautiful and terrifying on her otherworldly face. As for me, I existed in a state of constant emotional whiplash. I missed my wife and children desperately. I hated myself for what I'd done, for the situation I'd trapped everyone in. But I also couldn't deny that Arashi fascinated me, that learning from her was like being given access to secrets the universe had kept hidden since time began. Was this what she meant when she demanded we love her? Not romance, but respect. Not passion, but genuine care and interest. I didn't know. The 7 years stretched ahead like an eternity, and we'd only completed one. The years passed like water through our fingers, sometimes racing by in torrents, sometimes trickling past so slowly I could count each agonizing second. We lost 3 people to natural causes. Old man Okoro, to a heart that simply stopped beating one night. A stillborn baby who never drew breath, and a grandmother who slipped away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 94. Each time, we held our breath, waiting to see if Arashi would consider these deaths violations of our agreement. Each time, she let them pass, acknowledging that even gods cannot stop time from claiming what belongs to it. But on the night I watched Obi die, I understood that death can wear many faces, and not all of them are natural. It was the final week of the 7th year. We'd made it so far, kept everyone safe, met every condition Yurashi had set before us. The finish line was finally in sight, and Amadiora had begun to breathe easier. People talked about the future again, made plans, allowed themselves to hope. On the night of the wedding feast, yes, Arashi insisted we celebrate our 7th anniversary with all the ceremony we'd skipped the first time. The goddess looked more radiant than I'd ever seen her. She'd chosen a human form so perfect it almost hurt to look at her directly. She laughed at our jokes, danced to our drums, seemed almost happy. Then she called Obi to her, kissed his forehead, and said, "Thank you for keeping your vows. Now, as payment, I will take your life." He didn't even have time to scream. One moment he was standing there, confusion crossing his face, and the next he was collapsing, his soul simply leaving. His body hit the ground like a sack of grain, empty and gone. "You said 7 years," Emeka shouted, tears streaming down his face. "We've done everything you asked." "Everything. And the 7th condition," Urashi said calmly, "was that at the end of 7 years, you would each give me something precious, something so valuable that its loss would hurt." She looked at me. "For Obi, I took his life. He gave me 7 years, so I took eternity from him. Fair exchange, I think." My blood turned to ice. "And what will you take from us?" She smiled, and in that smile I saw the grief and rage that had never truly left her. We'd been fools to think she'd actually softened, that she'd learned to care for us. This had always been about punishment, about making us understand loss the way she understood it. "Come, husband," she said to Emeka. "Let's retire to the wedding chamber. I have something special planned for you." I tried to follow them, to intervene somehow, but my legs wouldn't move. Some divine power rooted me in place, while Emeka walked like a man in a dream toward the house we built 7 years ago. I heard him scream once, sharp and desperate. Then, silence. When Arashi emerged an hour later, she was alone. She sat beside me, and I could finally move again, but it was too late. Too late to save my friends. Too late to do anything but wait for my own payment to come due. "He's not dead," she said, reading my thoughts. "Not exactly. I took his mind instead of his life. He breathes, his heart beats, but behind his eyes, there is nothing. He'll live for many years yet, an empty vessel that his family will have to feed and clean and care for. They'll watch him every day and remember the man he was, and their grief will be endless." "You're a monster," I whispered. "I'm a mother," she corrected. "A mother who lost her child. Did you think there would be no real price to pay?" She stood and held out her hand to me. "It's time for me to collect from you as well." I followed her to the river's edge, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. Would she take my life like Obi's, my mind like Emeka's? What precious thing did I have left to lose? We stood at the water's edge, and she cupped my face in her hands. Her touch was cold as river water, and I felt her power flowing through me, searching, probing, looking for what would hurt me most to lose. "Ah," she said softly. "Yes, I see it now. I'll take your joy," Urashi said, her black eyes boring into mine. "Not your life, not your mind, but your ability to feel happiness. You'll remember what joy felt like, the laughter of your children, the warmth of your wife's embrace, the satisfaction of a good day's work. But you'll never experience it again. You'll spend the rest of your days hollow, going through the motions of living without ever truly feeling alive." I felt something inside me break then, or perhaps break free. A coldness spread through my chest, and suddenly the world looked different. Gray, flat. The stars above no longer seemed beautiful, just points of light in darkness. The river's song became mere noise. Even the grief I felt for my friends felt distant, observed rather than experienced. "Please," I managed to say, though I felt nothing behind the word. "Not this." "You took my daughter's future," Arashi said. "Every sunrise she'll never see, every song she'll never sing, every moment of wonder she'll never experience. You consumed her potential and used it to fill your bellies. Now you'll live with potential unrealized, with a life that continues, but never truly satisfies." She released me and stepped back into the river. The 7 years are complete. The debt is paid. Everyone who ate my daughter's flesh may live. They've been punished enough by watching what happened here tonight. But you three, the ones who made the choice to kill her, you carry the real weight forever. "What about the agreement?" I asked numbly. "We kept everyone alive. We met all your conditions." "You did," she acknowledged, "and I've kept my word. Everyone lives, but I never promised that living would be easy. I never promised that survival would feel like victory." The water began to rise around her, pulling her back into the depths. "You'll tell this story, Chukwudi. That's what you do now. You survive, and you tell it. You warn others about the cost of taking what isn't theirs, about respecting the boundaries between worlds, about the price of ignorance. And every time you tell it, you'll remember what you lost. You'll remember what it felt like to feel." Then she was gone, sinking beneath the surface, leaving only ripples that quickly smoothed to nothing. I stood there for a long time, trying to cry, trying to feel something other than this terrible emptiness. But the tears wouldn't come, the grief wouldn't come. There was only the hollow knowledge that I should be devastated, the intellectual understanding that my life had just been shattered, but no emotional response to match it. Eventually, I walked back to the village. The dawn came gray and cold. I watched the sun rise over the Orimili, trying to remember what sunrises used to make me feel. There had been a time when the colors moved something inside me, when the promise of a new day sparked hope in my chest. Now I observed the oranges and pinks spreading across the sky with the same detachment I might observe clouds or stones, present, visible, but meaningless. The village slowly returned to normal life, or what passed for normal after 7 years of living under a curse. Markets reopened. Children played without constant supervision. Men returned to fishing without fear. But certain families bore scars that would never heal. Obi's widow wore black for the rest of her life. Emeka's wife aged 20 years in the span of one, her face becoming a map of grief and exhaustion. And my own family learned to live with a father and husband who was present in body, but absent in every way that mattered. Obi's body had been carried to his compound, where his wife wailed over him, while neighbors gathered to mourn. Emeka sat propped against a wall, eyes open but unseeing, drool running down his chin. His wife tried to get him to recognize her, calling his name over and over, but he only stared ahead at nothing. My own wife, Adayazi, found me, and threw her arms around me. "You're alive," she sobbed. "Thank God, you're alive." I held her because I knew I should, because some mechanical part of me remembered that this was what you did when someone you loved was upset. But I felt nothing. Not relief at surviving, not gratitude for her presence, not even sadness at what I'd become. "I'm alive," I agreed, and the words felt like lies. The village wanted to exile us, Obi's corpse, Emeka's empty shell, and my hollow existence. We were reminders of what had happened, of the curse that had hung over them all for 7 years. But old Nwanze stood before the council and said, "They paid the price for all of us. They saved our children, our families. We owe them care, not exile." So we stayed. Obi was buried with full honors. 3 days later, Emeka was cared for by his wife, who, despite everything, couldn't abandon him. She fed him, cleaned him, kept him alive, even though the man she'd married was gone. Sometimes I wonder if that was her own punishment, to be bound to his empty vessel, to remember every day what they'd lost. As for me, I returned to my family, to my wife and children who tried so hard to make me happy. They cooked my favorite meals, told me jokes, brought me my grandchildren when they were born. And I went through the motions, smiled when I was supposed to smile, laughed when laughter was expected. But inside, there was only emptiness. The years passed. A daisy grew old beside me, and I watched it happen with the detached interest of someone observing a river slowly eroding its banks. She died peacefully in her sleep when we'd been married 42 years, and I buried her with dry eyes, feeling nothing. My children grew, had children of their own, and I became a grandfather, then a great-grandfather. They all tried to reach me, to find some spark of the man I'd been before. But that man had drowned 7 years into my marriage to a goddess. What remained was just a shell that breathed and moved and told stories. Because that's what I do now. I tell this story to anyone who will listen. To fishermen who grow greedy when catches are scarce. To villagers who forget to honor the spirits that dwell in wild places. To young people who think the old ways are just superstition. I tell them about 3 foolish fishermen who found something strange and beautiful and killed it without asking what it was. I tell them about a goddess's grief and a village's terror. I tell them about the price we paid. Obi's life, Emeka's mind, and my ability to feel joy ever again. And I tell them that I'm 93 years old now, still alive, still breathing, still walking this earth without ever truly living on it. I've outlived my wife, most of my friends, even some of my children. And every morning when I wake, I remember what happiness felt like, the way you might remember a dream just before it fades completely. The river still flows past Amadiora. Sometimes, on moonless nights, I walk to its banks and stare into the dark water. Sometimes I think I see her there, Urashi, watching me from the depths. Sometimes I think I see a younger form beside her, her daughter, reborn from river foam and starlight, given another chance at existence. I never fish anymore. The thought of it, even after all these years, feels like violation. People ask me sometimes if I regret that day, if I wish I'd listened to old Nwanzi's warnings, if I'd change things, if I could go back. And I tell them the truth. I don't know. I literally cannot feel enough about anything to know if I regret it. The capacity for that kind of emotional reckoning was taken from me along with my joy. But I can tell you this, the river remembers. The water carries memory in ways we cannot comprehend. And every creature that dwells in the Orimili knows the story of 3 fishermen and a goddess's daughter. They know to be wary of humans with nets and hunger in their eyes. So if you ever pull something strange from the water, something that doesn't belong, something that fills you with both wonder and unease, stop, ask, pray, show respect to the things you don't understand. Because some prices are too high to pay, and some debts can never truly be settled. This is my story. This is my warning. This is the only gift I have left to give. If you found meaning in this tale, if it moved you or made you think, please share it with others. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and pass this story along to anyone who needs to hear it. Stories like this one survive only if they're told and retold, generation after generation. Help me keep this warning alive. I'll be here when the river calls me home, when it finally decides my debt is truly paid. Until then, I'll keep telling this story, keep warning others, keep existing in this hollow space between living and dying. The goddess took my joy, but she couldn't take my purpose. Remember that when you stand at the water's edge with something precious in your nets. Remember what it cost us. Remember that some hungers should never be fed. The river always takes its price. Always.